Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. It is Tuesday, February 24th, the day that Andrew Johnson was first impeached. He's the first president of the U.S. to ever be impeached in 1868. And he was actually one vote away from being removed from office by the Senate, but then they were like, I guess we'll keep him.
He was the 17th president, right?
Right after Lincoln.
Because I always...
Imagine getting, Lincoln being as cherished and loved as he was by the time that he passed away.
He's even in strip law.
Yes, he is. That's why I'm talking about him so much. Not really. But yeah, so imagine being the one right after that where all of America is probably coming together to root for you and you still fail miserably. You still get almost impeached.
It's him and Andrew Jackson that I always get confused because I think Andrew Jackson was the 7th president or somewhere around there.
Historical names like that where it's that quick or Andrew. And then you also have a bunch of Hamiltons out there and stuff like that. Alexanders, I mean. So let's talk about Strip Law. It's a new cartoon comedy that dropped on the 20th on Netflix. It was made by Colin Crawford. At first, I thought it said it was made by the creators of The Good Place, but I guess I misunderstood that.
I think
Maybe
you're
it's
talking about
producers.
Dang. Dang is going to be a Netflix show that's Stephanie Sue, and that's going to be a different animated show. But Colin Crawford, he's done a lot of late night, which makes sense when you see the intro for this thing because it's very SNL-esque.
It also makes sense with the cast because the cast is a lot of comedians that have been on a lot of other cartoon shows and a lot of other podcasts.
There's so many cameos, a lot of comedy bang bang kind of circa. But for Colin Crawford, he worked on Stephen Colbert. Colin Crawford, yes, he worked on Stephen Colbert, Lights Out with David Spade. He wrote the first season of MODOK and Paradise PD, if you remember those shows.
Yeah. I do. I mean, you watched MODOK. You didn't watch Paradise PD.
I know.
That one did not get as good reviews, if I remember correctly. This show is basically Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. Instant I started watching it, the instant they showed that it was a fictionalized version of Austin Powers, who was being the witness on the stand, I was just like, how is this different? Except you're not facing a bunch of as many fictional characters. It's just a couple.
IGN said Netflix's Strip Law is the most mad adult animated debut since Rick and Morty. They also compared it to Harvey Birdman and Space Ghost Coast to Coast, kind of the old Adult Swim. If you
watch more old Swim. You change those words around. Old Adult Swim than I did. Do you agree?
Yes, because it's just as delirious. The animation is really not why you watch the TV show. It's kind of simplistic in the way that it's done.
It looks like every other Netflix show that's been coming out in the last however many years. And we'll talk about those.
Right.
The first episode is called Finally, a Show About Lawyers. So at least it has a sense of a humor about itself.
I really liked the name to this episode. That was actually one of my pros for it.
Right. And
it's like the fall and rise of Reggie Dinkins, just playing on itself.
Yeah, because you can name off all the lawyer shows that we've even talked about in the last few years. You got Lincoln Lawyer, She-Hulk, Your Honor, Night Court, Suits LA, 61st Street. I do have a list here, so I'm not just coming up with all of these. Perry Mason, So Help Me Todd. Some of those are funny, some of them are serious. But this show, it doesn't take the serious route in any regard. In fact, it's leaning into Vegas on shrooms, which isn't a very creative take because you literally see them on a bunch of painkiller drugs later on in the episode in Vegas. But it also feels a little lazy. Because they're going that route, it just feels like Idiocracy again, where everybody's an idiot. The judge is an idiot. The only sensible person who also has insecurity issues because his mom just died and he was fired is the main character, Lincoln Gum.
Yeah, and it seems like also Adam Scott is just playing Ben Wyatt in Parks and Recreation. Even the one note for this, or the one sentence I keep seeing is they describe him as too boring. And wasn't that just Ben Wyatt? Wasn't
Ben
that
was
his main
a
thing?
nerd, but he also he had that stupidity to him in the show, especially as the seasons went on and he became closer with Leslie. It seemed like they dumbed down his character quite some. But I mean, he was the mayor at one point in that show, so he had, I think, a more successful career at this point than Lincoln Gum has. Lincoln Gum, despite being a lawyer, just feels like he is failing at life. He constantly talks to his ghost mom and is making voices for her.
Well, he has, I know that I did see the commercial at them, but he has the one-on-one with Steve Nichols, voiced by Keith David, who is in every animated show known to man. He was actually the voice of the fish in Mr. Robot.
Yeah,
the fourth episode. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think my favorite thing I've heard of him as a voice actor is Has Been Hotel. Despite the fact that I also like the original actor who played that role in the YouTube pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was also in Adventure Time as well. He's
got a great voice for anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but this feels like Kangaroo Court. We see everybody's on their phone, including the judge who's watching the TV. There's a guy who's like just won a covered spread. We see juror number 8 turn her phone into to a flask, like a whiskey flask. We see people coming out like cheerleaders at a WWE fight. It just feels like Idiocracy, how things would be run in the future. However, I'm not exactly sure of the timeline because it feels like it's also supposed to be in the present. So it was like they wanted to make Vegas crazier than it is currently, and it also kind of wanted you to have a history of Vegas. We'll get into that in a little while, but Lincoln Gum loses the first case, and part of that is just because he's too boring to put up with this life, right?
Which was about someone throwing up on a baby, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess so, because they never even show who he was representing, or maybe they do in a second. I did catch that he was facing off against Nichols, who is Keith David's character. We get the backstory that he was fired by Nichols as soon as his mom, because they used to be Nichols and Gum in their firm, and then he decided once the mom passed away that he was going to get rid of her in the commercial. And then Lincoln Gum, decided to make his own firm with Glenn Blorschman, who is a disbarred attorney, and then his niece, who works as both the investigator, the Veronica Mars of the group, as well as both Blorschman and Irene tend to shake down the prior clientele to make sure that they get paid. And one of the clientele people is like Bob Henderson Toyota. That's his actual name because he decided to change it when he bought a Toyota, facility or something.
How did you feel that kind of B story fit in? Because it seemed like it was almost
felt like Detroiters,
completely unneeded. It did feel like Detroiters, but it felt like they also could have cut it probably took like 5 minutes.
It's introducing you to everybody. I understood why they were doing it. I wasn't like Irene or Glenn. I didn't really care about either one of them by the end of the episode. It didn't give me the same like instant Simpsons solar opposites, like, oh, I know who you are and I'm going to be on your side throughout this whole thing. It was just like, oh, it's another person.
I agree with you. Like, I like Stephen Root. I didn't know that he's been doing voice acting for at least one episode of animated shows all the way back since 1997. Like, that's been a streak that he has. And I think that he is a good actor, but like none of the characters except for the judge. I thought that every single time that the judge had something.
Every time the judge said something.
I thought he was the best character of the show by far.
Now that you say it, I agree.
But the main characters themselves, I didn't feel like there was anything compelling about them. Nothing that like made me even really root for them by the end.
Well, Barry Chandelier steps in there. He goes into the firm and he says, I've been waiting for a while. I needed to talk to you. I have a pro bono case that your mom was already working on, but then she just stopped calling me back. And every time I called the office, Irene would like yell at me or something like that. And I have my case my court case is tomorrow. And that's when Lincoln does a little freak out, but then he's like, I don't have anything else on my schedule. So what's the deal? And this guy is a stripper, and obviously they're in Vegas, so there's a lot of strip clubs. At the Brushfire Club, kind of like a Magic Mike situation. We see a full ad for it. And in that thing, or in the club, their whole gimmick is that on Fridays or something, that the strippers eat keys, car keys. And a stripper's dozen. How much is a stripper's dozen?
34.
34, right? Yeah. So 34 sets of car keys, which isn't good for you. And that's why Barry Chandelier is like suing or something, trying to get out of that contract. However, he's up against, once again, Nichols, who I'll remind you, was the person he was just up against in the last court case.
I assume it's going to be.
But Lincoln acted when he heard that like it was the first time he'd been facing off with Nichols since his mom's passing. Like he acted as if it was a bigger deal than I think it led me to believe.
And I assume that in the preceding episodes, it will only be Steve Nichols that he's fighting against.
Right. It seems like a fairly short cast. Even in the intro, you only see like 5 people listed. So yes, he goes outside to get drunk and spend the night like figuring out what's going on just by like calming down, and he meets Sheila Flambe, who is juror number 8. So he recognizes her from the courtroom, and she's doing magic on the streets. She does a trick, and then they spend a night on the town together.
So I actually like the card trick because I forgot. I watched a video a long time ago on this, but someone shot a bullet at like a card deck, and it actually didn't go through the card deck. So when she did the same thing here, I was like, oh, that's actually true. So
it's a classic card trick, yes.
Yeah, that was one of my pros for the show.
I think the coolest part was at the end when they showed you that the bullet's in it the whole time. Like that's just a planted bullet. It feels like, again, Penn and Teller, very famous Vegas show themselves. Yeah. They should pop in there at some point and talk to Sheila. So he ends up hiring Sheila after they get high and drunk and they go around. I think they blow up a cow.
Yeah, that was strange with like a rocket launcher, right?
In that montage, and he hires Sheila because she's a bit flamboyant. She's out there and she can really like understand the Vegas crowd, get them entertained, and he understands that's what he's missing in the courtroom. Said very few lawyers ever. However, he's like, I'll hire you. And from then on out, I thought he was going to be like an earpiece. I thought he was going to be her ratatouille. Like she was going to be the one that they were trying to pass
Behind
off
the scenes
as the lawyer.
Yeah.
And instead, it took a very less interesting take, and he still remained the lawyer, but she was just sitting on the bench with him, which is pretty legal, and just kind of setting up his tricks like an assistant. Right. I guess it's better pay for her, but at the same time, yeah. So he jumps into the court scene, the next, which is back to representing Barry. And what did you think of that little montage? Because it went through the trial really quickly about how he was no longer just this nerdy dude, but he was going to have a whole presentation.
Right, when he was like dressing better. It reminded me a lot of The Fly, especially the Mask. It reminded me of The Mask when he slipped into his scene.
Jim Carrey was started off as, or what's that Eddie Murphy movie where he takes the thing that balloons him, or actually slims him down?
Are you talking about the Nutty Professor?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that when Lincoln was going through his scene, kind of representing Barry when he was doing that like movie scene, there's a scene very similar to The Mask in it, so that's kind of what I connected it to.
My favorite one-liner was when they had the doctor, which we've seen 1,000 times, who's like being asked a question, and he just asked, should people eat car keys? And then he broke down and he was like, no. And then on cross, he breaks again because they're like,
nutritionist.
Well, how can you say such a thing? And he's like, I'm only a simple brain surgeon. Yeah, that actually got me to laugh. I also liked that they kept on using the pun of like, he'll gum up the works. It's like, so that's the only reason they made his name. They made his name Lincoln so that they could continually show little pictures of Lincoln throughout the episode, and they made his name Gum so that they could use it as a pun.
And so stupid. And they showed Marcia Gum in like the old ad that she was like a gum stick or whatever.
This is made for short attention spans. It is a stupid show.
So you think that's one of those shows that people are supposed to be looking at their phones for, like the famous story of how Stranger Things had to keep repeating their things because people were going to keep looking at their phones?
Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like it could also just be a one-off type of Love, Death, and Robots where they just come out with a bunch of simple comedies for like every state. This just felt like so like, let's pull out of a rabbit out of a hat. We'll pull out Vegas. We'll pull out Lawyer, and we'll pull out Adam Scott, and suddenly we have like one episode show here, one episode show. I would have liked that.
Mad Libs.
Yeah, it's like a Mad Libs of a TV show. But where am I going with this? So Keith David's character, Nichols, he is unprepared for how prepared this guy seems now. And so he ends up losing the case. But before that, we keep on seeing him like schmoozing it up with a bunch of these strip club managers who are literally eating. They're doing that Nyo Taimori, the thing where they take like a woman and they're still awake and they're just like eating off their body, sushi and stuff like that.
Spaghetti and meatballs. Yep.
Yeah, but instead of sushi, I was pointing out, so it was a spaghetti this time. And one thing that the show likes to point out too is that it's made not by AI. So it put that right in the title card. And so I guess if you want to give it props for that.
It's a love letter to Las Vegas. That's at least what Variety said.
At its best, it wants to be somewhere between like BoJack-ish, the new BoJack on Netflix. They're never going to get that. It
doesn't have the heart. It doesn't have the heart in it, I feel like.
It's a less outlandish version of Gary and his demons. You got Haunted Hotel out there. It feels a little bit like that. Mulligan. It's just one of many of these shows. And it doesn't have the heart you were talking about that Long Short Story had. Last year, they didn't recreate BoJack, but they did do something new, and it worked because you were dealing with multiple timelines and the characters. It was a very character-driven story where every single one of them expand. I don't see that happening with Lincoln. It just does not seem like that he has that many layers. And as I said before, it's not the Solar Opposites or Simpsons characters where you can instantly be like, oh, that's going to be around forever. So overall, because I know I missed some background jokes that on rewatch will be okay, and because it's an okay show to just have on in the background, I'll give it a 5.5 out of 10. But like, I think I have some cons, especially when you talk about the love letter for it being to Las Vegas, right? So in order to understand some of these jokes, like when they were at a performance, it seemed like it was a mixture of the Excalibur tournament for kings, where they ride around on horses and then like
Right,
have people
jousting.
shout, yeah, the jousting with Evil Knievel's, because it was called the Knievel something or other, Caesar's Palace jump that he did in 1967. I don't think a lot of people are going to understand that reference,
Yeah, I don't
given
know.
that like most of them, if were not alive at that point, and maybe they know Evil Knievel just from Bart Simpson, but like I don't think a lot of people would understand that.
And I know you're talking about locale references, but just as we're on the subject, also Austin Powers in the beginning of the episode, I don't understand why that was even in the show at all.
That either worked or it didn't. I feel like there's a base of fans out there who laughed at that.
It
Yeah.
reminded me of the Pentaveret when it's shoehorned in, the Mike Myers show when it's shoehorned in Shrek out of
The Mike
nowhere.
Myers show was not very good.
But at least that had the excuse of having Mike Myers. The Austin Powers thing,
I
that's
thought it was
old.
the beginning of something. I thought we were seeing like a Robot Chicken thing where it was going to be one celebrity after another, like fictionalized celebrity after another, and that would have been kind of
Yeah, I
interesting
would like
too,
that. Yeah,
because it would have just been Harvey Birdman even more. But it also was a little fudgy on the rules. Like at one end, it seemed like drugs were legal, like you could just buy them off the street, not by some shady dude, but actually by a vending machine. And that might have just been hyperbole. I don't know. And then later on, they explain how you still can't shoot a gun in court. So
yeah.
some rules are acceptable, some not. We may be in the middle of that idiocracy sphere. The ending joke where they were starting to pick apart the own episode and they were like on the news report saying, how did we pick a jury in one day? That type of thing.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that because, again, it's just a 20-minute show that's making fun of itself. It's a Peter Griffin joke almost.
Yeah, well, it feels like it's trying to also be very meta. I just didn't think that meshed well, so I would probably give it a 4 out of 10. I know that Yahoo said that it was a ridiculous cousin to Night Court and Ally McBeal. The show...
Night Court being one of... Oh, no, I did mention Night Court and a bunch of the legal shows that we talked about. Yeah.
And the show is just all over the map when it comes to reviews. You can find places like the AV Club, which gave it a C+, but then you also have places like Variety that enjoyed it. It has a 6.2 on IMDb, 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think that it's going to be renewed for season 2.
When I said made for short attention spans, I also mean it's like short form content. Even in the commercials, it kept on pulling back layer after layer, being like, no, that's the fake out. That's a fake out. That's a fake out. It was like, get your eyeballs on this. And that feels very much like improv comedy is today, or even what you'd hear on the podcast. So I think they probably bring that to it. So if you enjoy hearing these people make jokes anyways, there's no reason why you wouldn't want to see them do it in front of an animation thing. But if you're putting that against like hardcore, like really well thought out animation dialogue and stuff like that, it doesn't come anywhere close to where it needs to be a really, really good show.
I know we've already said it, but it just feels lazy in the end. And I thought that the only like good animation was really that intro scene, the intro that will probably be for every episode where it was just showing the outside and the blue lights. I liked how that looked, but I just can't find a reason to recommend this, I think, to anyone.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but there were parts that I laughed at. So even though it's lazy, it doesn't mean that I couldn't have found some jokes that were pretty funny in there. But also, I can't imagine trying to eat 34 keys unless you're David Blaine. David Blaine could manage that, I think, right?
Didn't he spit up a frog one time or something?
He had a whole like aquarium, and I think that they used to do that in old magician type things. I wonder if they're just going to continue teaching Sheila Flambe tricks throughout the whole thing. That would be cool too. I am curious how they're going to be able to manage 8 episodes, 10 episodes,
10 episodes.
10 episodes.
It was
so
it was
I might
produced.
jump to like the 10th episode to see how it is.
And the animated studio that worked on it was Titmouse. So they've worked on like
it's starting to feel like Titmouse is just kind of like phoning it in though, because this feels like it could have been the same animation that I've seen in 100 different shows. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.